everyone, GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. I'm Carly Riley, and today is another recap episode. We are going through the hottest topics of the week, which there's so much going on, and yet it still feels like really the only topic of the week is Yuga Labs between their acquisition and the APE Coin, which launched this morning. As we're recording this, it's Thursday. But most importantly, I am joined in this episode by a very special guest, my friend Jon Rogers. He has been on the show before. You love him. You know him. Former Disney exec who's going to talk all things Web3. We'll probably get into some Disney news, but again, the top of the hour must be spent on ApeCoin and Yuga Labs. Jon, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me back. It's great to be here again. And yes, the fallout continues from the amazing blockbuster announcement from Yuga Labs.
Absolutely. So we are going to dive into that, and I think you're going to I'll give kind of an overview. You can really break down what we know so far in terms of what they're saying the money is going to be spent on, how the DAO structure is going to work, like really what comes next. What are these AIPs, these ape improvement protocols? What does that all look like?
Also known as apes.
Also apes, AIPs. But first, we are going to hear a word from some of our wonderful sponsors, and then we will dive right in.
Everyone is talking about the metaverse these days, and we're all still trying to figure out what it actually is, because everyone is looking for how to get exposure to it. That is why a metaverse index fund is so important, because in such a young market, an index can give you broad exposure to all the various players who are building out all these digital worlds that will ultimately become the metaverse. And that's why you should check out the Metaverse Index from the Index Co-op. The Metaverse Index gives you simple, easy, and safe one-click exposure to the emerging open metaverse trend. The MVI Index contains some of the biggest metaverse projects out there, including AXIE Infinity, Decentraland, Illuvium, and more. So join thousands of holders who have already trusted nearly $50 million to the MVI Index. And if you buy $500 of MVI on the Dharma app, you can receive $50 worth of ETH on the Polygon network. There's a link in the show notes for you to click so you can get started on your journey into the metaverse. AXIE Infinity is a game universe filled with cute, fascinating little creatures called AXIEs that players can collect as pets. Players aim to battle, breed, collect, raise, and build kingdoms for their AXIEs. There are and will be many varied gaming experiences for AXIEs, many of them having players compete with each other using complex strategies and tactics to attain top rankings or be rewarded with coveted resources. Others will have them complete quests, defeat bosses, and unlock in-depth storylines. There are countless unique AXIEs that players can collect with varying body parts and experiences. The AXIE universe is a player-owned economy where the players can truly own, buy, sell, and trade the resources they earn in the game through skilled gameplay and contributions to the ecosystem. It's a digital nation where people come together globally with their AXIEs to play, earn, and live. Join the AXIE revolution at axieinfinity.com/bankless.
All right, we are back. We're going to start by talking about the Yuga Labs acquisition, because we're going to take these things chronologically. Obviously, ApeCoin is big news, but I haven't really broken down the Yuga acquisition on this show yet. I talked about it a little bit in my interview with Jimmy McNeilus, which came out earlier this week, but we haven't gone full tilt on the Yuga Labs buying Meebits and buying CryptoPunks. I was thinking maybe we take this like according to each stakeholder, like in this deal, ape holders, punk holders, Meebit holders, and sort of break down what the reaction is on that side. I know you have some interesting insights you want to share, kind of breaking down what DC Investor has been saying. He's in the punk camp, call it. But let's do that last. Let's start with ape holders. My feeling is they're pretty happy about this. It feels sort of like in the ape punk war, this is a sign that they almost won in some ways, and Yuga, reigned supreme over Larva in a certain way. What have you been seeing when it comes to ape holders' reactions to this news?
Yeah, my takeaway is that the ape holders are very happy about this. This is going to open up a lot of opportunities for ape holders. Obviously, some of the announcements that came out afterwards about the DAO and the coin are certainly going to, this is obviously a big build, and so that's all going to kind of come into play here. So yeah, the ape holders are happy. I think they should be happy about this. I don't really like to characterize it as a war between punks and apes, although I know that's sort of played out on Twitter that way. Each brand is unique and indifferent, and as long as Yuga manages them as such, I think it should be okay. Now, I have some thoughts on the punk side of things, which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah.
But I think the main thing is that it's not like trying to bring conformity to multiple brands. It's respecting what the unique attributes of each brand and what makes it special.
Like a Disney or any of these, mega IP holder entities need to do, right? Which is think about, hey, you know this better than anybody. Like, think about each of their properties as distinct for what it does, each of its franchises.
Yeah, my theory has been that we will see over time the emergence of what you might think of like the traditional big studios, the big six, now the big five, like a Disney or a Universal, that will occur in the NFT space. And what I think we've just seen is the first, not the only, because some people have called this a monopoly, and this is nowhere near a monopoly, but this is the first of those studios to emerge.
The first shot across that bow.
Yeah. Now, there will be 10 others, perhaps, over the next couple of years that also emerge, and they will have a brand portfolio of properties that they're managing and building communities around. And so I think that's really exciting that, okay, the first one's emerged. Now who's going to be set next?
Yeah, I think it's exciting too. As a podcast host, I am excited about talking about these kinds of business machinations that I think are going on behind the scenes. And I tweeted in January, like, when do we see major NFT brands buying up other NFT IP? So it came faster than I thought, but I enjoyed kind of flexing on that.
And I'll riff on that for a minute, because a lot of the conversation online in the community is about there's like a race to first, to be biggest. And that's not necessarily the right way to look at it. There will be a biggest for sure. Right now it is apes, clearly. But it's healthy to have a medium-sized property. It's healthy to have smaller niche, smaller size properties. A portfolio, that's the purpose of a portfolio strategy, that you're going to have big ones and small ones, and they serve different communities, and that is the healthy way to manage it. And I think there's tremendous opportunities for teams that want to create go other directions. And I'm excited
also about it. The having smaller brands, having niche brands is actually what's so incredible about this space, right? Which back in 20 years ago, you had these gatekeepers that determined what got shown on TV or on film, and it was mostly a bunch of white men who had a particular set of preferences and said, this is what people, quote unquote, want to see. And what we've learned is that's not necessarily true. People want to see all sorts of different kinds of things. We're however many billions of people on the planet. And so I think it's beautiful to see the emergence of this show, for example, right? Like, there's a niche audience that likes the show, and it's not insignificant, but would a studio head have greenlit this and been like, yeah, people absolutely want to see it if this was 20 years ago and there was 5 channels? You know what I'm saying? So I think that's it's actually the power of this space and of what's happened sort of in the internet in general is the ability to have content that appeals to 10,000 people that just are diehards and love it. I want to ask you.
I was going to say, it's like the whole newsletter subscription business that's emerged. 10,000 people is a healthy business for one or two creators. It's amazing, actually.
The 10,000 true fan theory that can now actually play out in a way that wasn't possible, again, when you had all these gatekeepers who determined, what was popular. I use the Shonda Rhimes example always, which was you had people being like, nobody wants to watch stars that aren't white. And she was like, well, here's Sandra Oh and Kerry Washington and amazing rich characters, and they're the most popular shows of all time. So here was my question. I started to raise this with Jimmy, but I want to ask you as well, because I think it's interesting. Do you think ape holders see their apes as a stake, as having equity or a piece of Yuga Labs? And I'll start there. Do you think that they see that? In the way that ENS token holders see that as sort of ownership over ENS?
There's what's the perception and what's the reality. I wouldn't say ape holders as a community as a whole see it that way, but there are certainly individuals that think that holding an ape gives a say in the management of Yuga, or perhaps the direction of Yuga. And the reality is that is not the case. Yuga is its own independent entity. The founders and the investors in Yuga have that control. And that's, I think, a little bit of where DC Investor came in, was this is a corporation. I don't think I like to call Yuga a corporation quite yet. That's not the way they're operating, and I don't think that's the way they want to operate, but they are a business. They will pursue other opportunities. You, as an owner of an ape, do not have control over what they do, and they could eventually sell apes to a Universal someday or some other entity, and you don't have control of that. And that's, I think, where DC Investor was going, and I loved seeing how he worked this through over the last, say, 5 or 6 days, where it started off, I think, quite negative towards the deal and kind of be moved into a slightly more neutral position. But just seeing him working through it through Twitter was fascinating to follow. And he basically posted only CC0 projects going forward. He changed his PFP. He really talked a lot. I think I even put a quote over here. I'm done building identities and brands which corporations can buy and sell without paying me. I thought that was a great quote. Now, there's room for lots of kinds of projects. CC0 is one. There's room for restricted licensees, and you as an investor, buyer, participant in the community have to pick what's right for you. And he's clearly stated what's going to be right for him going forward.
So take us through the DC investor journey. This is now moving us to how do punk holders feel about this acquisition? And I think some probably fine with it. And then you had some really outspoken detractors of the deal, DC Investor obviously being number one. So it was his first sort of outrage was around feeling like this, it
was a betrayal.
A betrayal. And explain why.
Well, there's this perception that punks were the original OG collection. Now, CryptoKitties are certainly there as well, but punks were one of the first on Ethereum, I believe. And the thing here is that they're feeling that what made them special and different was that unique status of they were the first, they were art, they were untouchable. And now there's been the pressure recently to try to open up commercial rights from some of the holders. Punk 4156 famously sold his collection in frustration with what would happen, which I'm sure that person's probably regretting that move right now because this gave them what they would have wanted. But I think for a lot of those OG punk holders, and you would put me in this camp personally, is I'd be frustrated. I felt like I had something, I had an agreement as to what I purchased, and it got rug pulled. It got pulled out from underneath me and changed.
And what was the agreement? The agreement was this like historic property that was owned by Larva Labs. Yeah. Like what's the
I think and this isn't written, of course, but this is sort of an understood agreement that was violated, which was that this is going to be held as special and held as unique. It's not going to be commercialized. It is what it is. This was the creator's intention, and that's going to be honored and kept. And what happened was these creators sold it and did not honor that intention. And so I think there's a lot of original buyers who've been holding these for several years now, some have large collections, and can be frustrated. And I feel that frustration for them, that I would be in the same camp if I were a punk owner.
And I think it also starts to, awaken fears of centralization, right? This idea like, oh, wow, we're seeing this stuff can just be bought and sold by a couple actors sort of in an old world style. And what if Yuga, for example, bought up a bunch of other IP properties and turned around and sold that all to Meta, And,
yeah, exactly.
And ultimately, we don't actually have the power to stop that. And I'll be curious if the DAO that Yuga is trying to set up, if there's an idea that there would be some say in this with this DAO in terms of like later sales and purchases of IP. But I think that's was stirred up in folks of like, oh my gosh, yeah, okay, I still, despite all of what we say in Web3, I still don't really own this thing in a way that I feel I should, given the ethos of Web3, and it can just be sold off.
Yeah, and I think DC Investor basically said if you don't have a CC0, you don't truly own it. There's always a restriction. There's always a limit of some kind.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, right? Because with CCO, if the project can't be sold, it's in the public domain. So there is no buying or selling of it. Everybody owns all of it collectively, which to some extent means sort of nobody's making money on it unless you find a way to monetize, unless you create a project with it that you can monetize, yep. Right?
Right.
I'm working this through in real time. I mean, I guess what it feels like, could you have is there a way to set it up where a community of holders collectively owns the IP of the whole thing so that when the IP sells, they actually get royalties off of that sale, right? Like I think what would have felt better, and I guess this is a question, and again, working it through in real time, is had the Punk collection sold to Yuga Labs and Punk holders received royalties on that sale, that might have felt different to folks. Would you agree? What is your reaction to that?
I still think Punk holders would have been disappointed. I think it's still a change from what they originally got into. It may have made the bitterness a little bit sweeter, but it still, I think, would have had that. For me, it would have had that
bad taste.
Yeah.
DC Investor also
one of the errors we make in this space, I think, too frequently is we think it's all about the money. And coming from where blockchain originated with cryptocurrency, there's a lot of that. A lot of the people in the community who came in because of money or cryptocurrency. But there's a lot of new people coming in who truly do care about it as an art, as a storytelling platform. And I think that's kind of where we're now at that mixing point of there's different agendas, different interests in the community.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Punks isn't a good example of this in the sense that I agree. I think there was an ethos that felt violated of like Punks are above all of this. They're above the sort of commercialization. They're the cave painting, writings on the wall, the early thing that sort of don't have a price. So putting a price on them like that is, I get why that violates it. But even more abstractly, just wondering moving forward, when IPs sell, can token holders get a cut of that? Would that feel better to folks? Would that, I don't know. DC Investor also had.
I was gonna say, now you're venturing into the world of where is this a security?
Yeah. Oh, totally. You're right. That's exactly what that is.
And you're opening up a huge can of worms. That would definitely fail the Howey test.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and that's why you have projects like Deadheads, and Doodles has talked about doing versions of this where you actually just stake your particular individual NFT in a way that they can claim they're licensing it and paying you royalties on that license as opposed to just paying you for being a holder or, whatever. Okay, DC Investor also had a comparison to like microbreweries, and he was like, that's what this feels like, is you have all these microbreweries, which are these kind of individual NFTs, and ultimately many of them end up getting bought up by big Anheuser-Busch, right? Like I actually was with somebody this past weekend who worked for Kona, the beer brand Kona, and she had left Anheuser-Busch to go work for Kona, like an independent beer brand. And then Kona ended up getting bought by Anheuser-Busch. She's like, so I'm now back at working at Anheuser-Busch after having left it for a smaller brand.
It's funny, on that point, I worked as a CMO at Ninkasi Brewery in Eugene, Oregon for a while. So I spent a couple years in the trenches of the craft beer industry. And it was a real problem that they would, for instance, in Eugene, which Ninkasi is the biggest brand, one of the biggest brands on the West Coast. And we had a local competitor called Hop Valley. Miller Coors came and bought Hop Valley. They still presented themselves as an independent craft brewery and obscured the ownership by Miller Coors. Yet Miller Coors dumped tons of resources into that brand. It made it really hard for us to compete. And it was completely, and the consumer was completely being lied to about what was this ownership? What is this relationship? It made it for a really tough time in the industry. It still is a tough time in that industry. So I love that comparison.
And is the issue too, it seemed like DC Investor was making the case that in order to really succeed, in the beer business, at scale, you ultimately needed to be acquired by one of those brands because you really just kind of couldn't compete unless you were acquired by a bigger brand. Is there, I guess there's a fear, right, that's where we end up in the NFT space, which is it becomes harder to be an individual creator. Though back to our earlier point, I don't think it'll play out that way. Yeah.
I think it's different in this space. And what makes it different is that beer is a physical real world product that has to be shipped on trucks and sold on store shelves or in restaurants and bars. NFTs, digital commerce, is global. It has very low barriers to transportation, to movement. So I think it's going to be a lot different in the space. I think there's a lot more opportunity for brands to emerge and to compete. And this is such early days. The beer industry is really a very mature industry and an old industry. This is just such an early, young industry that it's changing so quickly. I'm not worried about that right now. And I won't be for a long time, I don't think. Yeah,
nor am I. And again, I think there's room for the 10,000 True Fan project that doesn't have to be Bored Apes to thrive. Okay.
It goes back to that CoinDesk article about this is a monopoly, and no, It's big is not a monopoly.
Yeah, that didn't really resonate for me either. The the idea that this was somehow a monopoly or it felt like a weak argument in my opinion. Okay, front running the acquisition. This was something NFT Ethics, the account, posted a long thread on this. I don't think we have to spend too much time on it, but there were some senior people at Twitter, senior people in places, actually a lot of social media companies who started buying up a lot of Meebits before there was even sort of leaked news of this. And seems pretty clear that, obviously people had advanced knowledge and started buying up Meebits. And there's no, insider trading laws in the world of NFTs because, again, these aren't securities. But I'm curious how you feel about that. And I guess this also dovetails us with how Meebits holders are feeling, which I think on this deal is relatively positive.
Yeah, there were indeed many questionable transactions. You can't deny when all of a sudden 100 Meebits are bought like the day before the announcement that these are very questionable. Now, I want to be cautioned that I don't think that every transaction for a Meebit in the 48 hours leading up to this announcement was improper. Some people just got lucky and got in at the right time. So we need to caution that's...
Well, and beyond that, it started leaking, right? So like I was in group chats with people where it had kind of publicly leaked on Twitter and people were buying based on that news. So I think a lot of people in the right before were just speculating on basically what was a public speculation.
But here's what's going to happen. Now, it's not illegal because these aren't securities yet, but it is highly unethical. And the blockchain is transparent. If you know who owns a wallet, you know who made a purchase. And some of these people, like agents at UTA, who worked on Meebits and made purchases in 48 hours before the announcement, they're probably at risk of losing their jobs, and they should be. This is unethical behavior that, even at Disney, when I joined Disney, they go through an entire training program about ethics around the stock and trading transactions and access to insider information. And well, that's a security. It's unethical and it will violate a lot of companies' policies. So I imagine a few people could be at risk of losing their jobs because of this. And going forward long term, as the industry begins to advance with regulation and the discussion that's about to happen with the Biden administration and the Senate Banking Committee, there will be possibly some regulations or policies put in place that could have some effect here long term. One of the things I've noticed in the space in my year or so working in it is that conflicts of interest are everywhere. Like everywhere I look, I'm seeing conflicts of interest, things that would never fly in a regulated financial industry. And I think a lot of projects and teams need to start thinking about where do we have conflicts of interest in our organization, in our team, because this might be a problem eventually.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think you summed that up well. So I want to bring us then to the biggest news of the week. I don't know, is it bigger than the Yuga Labs acquisition? It's just more recent, so it's become the talk of the town, which of course is ApeCoin. I'll give sort of the high level here for anybody who's been under a rock for the last 48 hours, and then Jon would love to have you really break down what this looks like at a more detailed level. So essentially, this is a pretty simple ERC20 token that everybody knew was coming. People knew that Bored Apes were going to release a coin at some point. We didn't know exactly when it would be. Of course, it's now. And it's got a supply of 1 billion, which I thought was interesting. I'm sure somebody will do a long tokenomics breakdown of this in an interesting way, and I look forward to that. But for some comparisons, I think Chainlink is a coin with like 1 billion supply, and Algorand has 10 billion. Obviously, it's quite bigger than the 21 million supply of a Bitcoin, but sort of in the realm of things we've seen before. One thing to note is in the distribution of this to holders. So holders were able to start claiming these ape coins. Holders of Bored Apes and Mutant Apes are able to start claiming these this morning. This is Thursday, March 17th. Bored Apes got like 10,000 and change for every Bored Ape they held. Mutant Apes were entitled like 2,000 something. So it was like a 5-to-1 ratio. So far more, you could claim far more as a Bored Ape holder. I saw some people pissed about that. They were like, the supply, there's double the supply, right? There's 20,000 or whatever it is, Mutant Apes, 10,000 Bored Apes. Why shouldn't it be a 2-to-1 ratio? It was a 5-to-1 ratio based on sort of the average price of each of these respective collections over the last, last however many months. So there was that. And then the other party in this that I saw a lot of sympathy for were the Kennel Club holders, the Bored Ape Kennel Club holders, who got no ape coins unless they also held mutants or bored apes, in which case if they also held a kennel, a dog, you know, they got a few more tokens. That surprised me, and was sort of a like, you're not fully a part of this ecosystem shot, it felt like, at the Kennel Club holders. Were you surprised by that? Did you have a reaction to the Kennel Club piece?
I did. I was surprised because when the Kennel Club was released a couple months ago, it was sort of presented as the next way to join the ape community.
Yeah.
And so I think there is a bit of a fair gripe there to, like, wait a minute, this was not what you told us when we aped into the Kennel Club. So I'm not surprised, but the challenge is tokenomics, especially when you've got this complexity behind it, is never going to make everyone happy. My take is that they've done a fair job, a good job, not more better than a fair job. They've done a good job at trying to balance all of the competing interests and handle it the right way. But the Kennel Club definitely
been really
stands
thoughtfully.
out.
Yeah. It's been thoughtfully rolled out. I'll give you the final kind of purpose here, and then again, did you want to add a thing there?
I was going to say that the 8% of the total supply is going to the founders of Bored Apes. So the two people we know, and I guess they're listing 4 people. I'm not sure who all 4 are, but so 8% of the total supply of the billion tokens is going to the founders, which seems a little bit rich to me. But we can talk a little bit more of that in a little bit more depth in a second.
Yeah, I really want to get into that. So let me just give this high level here, which is that really there's sort of 4 purposes they're stating for ApeCoin. It's governance over this ApeCoin DAO. You're going to help us understand a little bit more like what we know about ApeCoin DAO, what this is. So governance there, access to, this play to earn game that they're publicly saying they're coming out with, merch, other things, right? It gives you access to all sorts of parts of this ecosystem. It's really an incentivization mechanism for other game makers, other projects, et cetera, to, incorporate, like they're trying to incentivize a way, or, get a way for the Bored Ape ecosystem to be included in other games and things. Okay, maybe they use ApeCoin in their game, whatever. Then there's this last thing they mentioned, which is sort of funny to me. Let me find it. I just lost it. This unification of spend concept was sort of a purpose they named of ApeCoin. I was like, oh, you're just trying to find things to list so the SEC says this isn't a security. What does unification of spend mean? Now, like, the whole ecosystem is on one currency, whatever. They're trying to build out a whole ecosystem. Obviously, we know how these things go. That's what it states as its purpose is. I think we end this part of the conversation with our own thoughts on whether sort of non-ape holders should buy into ApeCoin. And I have some thoughts on this. But let's first turn to, can you break down for us, like, what do we know about this DAO? How have the tokens been distributed? What are they being spent on thus far? Give us that sort of insight.
Yeah, so the DAO is, first of all, I should say, I recommend everyone go take a look at the website for ApeCoin and read the articles of, I guess, corporations, lack of a better term, for the DAO. It's really fascinating. My takeaway is it's been very well thought out, very considered. I'm a little actually surprised at how well it's been put together. They appear to be doing this in partnership with Animoca Brands. I hope I said that correctly, which is a group out of Hong Kong and kind of well known in the space. Yeah. Yep. So well known in the space. It's been very well presented and thought out. And what the DAO is doing, they're also creating a foundation which will operate the DAO. So they on the website, they say someone has to write the checks. So basically, this is the team that actually does what the DAO tells them to do. Invest in this or do that. The foundation actually makes it happen. They've put in place a board of directors, which I think is really impressive, including Alexis Ohanian. So I think they've got a great team just to be
and
on
Yatsui,
the board.
who's the Animoca Brands founder, and Maria Bajwa, who I'm hoping to come on the pod. She's great at Venture Studios. Is Guy Osiri on the board?
I don't recall.
He's involved in some capacity. Guy Osiri, is the agent who reps World of Women and Bored Apes and Yuga and, like everything in the world, seems like, at this point. So,
yeah. So if you look at the proposals, now they've created what's called an AIP proposal, quote, Ape Improvement Proposal, or an APE. Okay, guys, please, enough is enough on the ape stuff. I will refer to them as an AIP in this discussion because there's just too many apes being thrown around. So AIP1 is administrative. They're setting up the DAO. This is the vote that says, yes, we're going to set this up and create the foundation. What's surprising in AIP1 is that they're budgeting $2 million for this, which seems astronomically high. I'm sure it's justifiable. I've set up a couple of DAOs now and have experience in that, and I've never had DAO establishment costs to that, even remotely close to that before.
Now, I will say their legal, they're going to want to go so hard on legal here, but 2 million, I agree, sounds very high, even factoring in for their crazy legal costs.
Yeah, if I was a holder, I would like to see more explanation. They do give some explanation of where that's going, but I'd like to see that in more details. Like, what is that budget for the setup cost of this? Because that's a lot. AIP2 is about voting protocols. Nothing really surprising out of that. That's kind of administrative as well. AIP3 is where it gets really interesting. This is their budget. So setting up kind of what the budget will go to for the first year. So essentially from now, March 17th, through the end of the calendar year. And the really exciting thing, I think, here is they're setting up a marketplace. So this will be a place outside of OpenSea where you can sell and trade your Ape NFTs. Presumably Punks and Meebits might be in that as well. But I think, it's really exciting because it's a step outside of OpenSea. Any kind of royalties that OpenSea would have collected that this marketplace intends to collect will be reinvested in the treasury. So they're not really taking a cut for themselves. It just goes back to the community. And I think that's pretty fabulous. And it also is a good example of why I think long-term, I'm a little bearish on marketplaces, because for big projects like this, if they can set up their own marketplace, long-term, is this really the way forward? And I think it is, like having your own branded marketplace.
So branded marketplaces where it becomes marketplaces are, essentially a commodity where each project can sort of have their own, and then we just have like aggregators that allow you, because there is something valuable about having everything in one spot.
Yeah, there'll definitely be aggregators like OpenSea, but I think that if you want to go buy a Disney NFT, you're going to go to the Disney marketplace. You want to buy an Ape NFT, you're going to go to the Ape marketplace, and they're obviously on Ethereum or on other chains that you can transport them, move them around, but why pay the fees to OpenSea if you can go to the Ape marketplace and the money goes back to the community? So I think that's a really exciting development. Of course, in the budget, they list off other things like hosting fees and things like that, but my favorite was they end the list of expenses to include merch. I don't know what it is about Web3 and everyone wanting merch, but and maybe I'm just kind of worn out about merch from my background at Disney, but yes, everyone wants their swag and their merch, and they've budgeted a healthy budget towards buying merch for the community.
Well, that makes sense to me in that I feel like Apes, the closest sort of comp, it has always felt like it is Supreme, like this like very cool streetwear like brand of sorts. So merch for Bored Apes in particular makes a lot of sense to me. People really want to show off that they're a part of this community. So I get that one.
All right, I'll put you in the camp of merch fan.
Yeah, merch fan, confused about the 2 million for initial setup. That's the camp you can put me in right now.
Yeah. It took me about 5 years to give away all my Lucasfilm Star Wars merch, but every kid that ever saw a Star Wars T-shirt or hat that I had, it was cool. Like, okay, you can have it, take it. I don't want it anymore.
I'm also very positive on merch because we sold a lot of merch on the Yang campaign. That was a huge sort of source of revenue for us and a huge source of creativity for us. Like he was called a longer than long shot by the New York Times. So we made longer than long shot glasses, like extra tall shot glasses. And, we did really fun things with the merch there. Obviously the math hats were huge. And it is a really good way to show your affinity. If you have like a cult following, I think merch is a powerful thing. So.
Yeah, we'll finish up on merch, but I'll say it's also a good brand builder. If it's done right, If it's cool, it's a good brand builder. So moving on, Ape number 4, Ape Improvement Project number 4 proposal is a staking mechanism, which I don't know too much about what they're doing here. This was proposed by Animoca Brands, but this is a mechanism where you can stake your tokens and I believe earn a return on them. So it's I think really interesting. And
they've allocated a good percentage of total Ape coins for staking rewards. I know staking hasn't actually been approved yet, but the presumption is that it will be 17%.
17.5%, which is ape number 5, the last of the one that's currently up there, is to the allocation of tokens for staking. And that's been set for 17.5% for 3 years, which does seem like a healthy percent that's been set up. So I think there's a lot to be learned, and they haven't communicated too much about the staking proposal yet. My guess is that they need to get through AIP 1, 2, and 3 and actually set the thing up before they get ahead of themselves. But they clearly wanted to get that at the top of the agenda by when they launched this. So it's going to be interesting.
Unstoppable Domains is the #1 provider of NFT domains. With domains ending in .crypto, .x, or .nft, Unstoppable Domains lets you replace your long, complex wallet address with a human-readable address. Using Unstoppable, you can verify the ownership over your NFTs, log into Web3 apps, and join tens of thousands of people using them as their Twitter usernames. With Unstoppable Domains, you can have all of your crypto addresses registered to one single domain. So it doesn't matter where crypto payments are coming from or where they're going. By registering all of your crypto addresses to your Unstoppable domain, all of that is taken care of in the back end. Better yet, with Unstoppable Domains, you don't have to worry about gas costs or renewal fees because you own it. Buy your domain and you can show it off as your new Twitter username. So you can get your name for as low as $5 at unstoppabledomains.com. Polygon is Ethereum's largest and most vibrant scaling solution to date. With millions of monthly users and all of the biggest DeFi apps, the Polygon ecosystem has turned into a blossoming metropolis of DeFi activity. Transactions on Polygon are quick and cheap, allowing users the freedom to achieve their DeFi goals, all while being economically anchored to Ethereum. But Polygon isn't just the proof-of-stake sidechain. The Polygon team is building a suite of scaling solutions, including Polygon Hermes, Maiden, Nightfall, and Zero, all with different design choices in order to be optimized for all possible crypto use cases. If you're a developer who wants to build on the Polygon ecosystem, go to the link in the show notes to check out their fantastic documentation. And if you're a user who just wants to experience fast and cheap DeFi, you can bridge over your ETH or other tokens and start playing around with any of the thousands of applications that are available on Polygon.
Okay, and where would you say high level, bullish, bearish? Are you going to go buy ApeCoin? Where do you fall?
I am bullish. I do not intend to buy ApeCoin for myself right now, but I am bullish. I think that you've got a good team here clearly working on it. They're working on a lot of interesting things. I'm bullish on it. I think there's going to be some interesting work to be done here.
Do we have other insights into, so it's 70.5% for staking rewards, it's 8% to the founding team. Do they have the other breakdown of what percent is actually being distributed out to holders in this initial airdrop?
So what I know is that 8% goes to the founders, the four founding team members. 14% is going to launch partners, which I'm assuming is going to be the board, VCs, if there's VCs involved, Animoca brands certainly. I'm certain that I was about to say that the board is getting a healthy allocation of tokens, which was a little bit of a surprise. It's a very healthy allocation. And 62% of the total is going to the community in terms of kind of ecosystem development. And so if you break that 62% into a 47-15, 15% goes to the Bored Ape holders. So all the kennel, the mutant apes, the Bored Apes. So what they're all getting is 15% of the overall billion tokens, and 47% is going to the treasury. So if you take those 62%, that seems like a very generous contribution to community. I've seen projects go as high as like 66 or a little bit higher than that. I've seen projects do a lot less. This seems to be on the upper end of what I've seen. So I would take away, okay, this is a healthy give to the community, even though perhaps the give to Yuga and the founders is a little bit high.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and look, I get it. They've built a massive project. They want to take a bit of a cut, and I don't know. You can debate it, but don't begrudge them too hard on it.
There's no one forcing you to buy these. There's no one forcing you to accept them. So if you don't like it, you can choose to opt out.
They're being transparent about it. Yeah, exactly. Don't buy it if you take issue with that. Any concern on this bringing down the hammer of the SEC? I know there's lots of people being like, oh, this is the thing that's going to get us all screwed. This is such a security, et cetera.
Not that it would bring down the hammer. I do expect that there will be this will be pulled into Congress. This will, because it's just such a high profile project and such a visible one. When Congress starts getting into kind of NFTs and staking mechanisms and are these securities, there's no doubt that folks from Yuga Labs are going to put in Animoca, perhaps, are going to be pulled in to have, give testimony. Does that mean it's bringing down the hammer? Not necessarily. It's just, it's too visible of a project not to want to know more at the congressional level. So I do expect it's going to get discussed.
And the ApeCoin Foundation, right? I'm assuming that's a 501c3.
It does not say, not that I've seen. It might be. I just haven't seen it in the documents.
Yeah, my assumption here is it's a 501c3, so that that's tax advantageous from the standpoint that they're not going to have to pay out crazy taxes to funds that come in. I'm again thinking this through in real time, y'all. They set it up sort of essentially as like a nonprofit. That's like the underlying legal structure for this DAO, and they will be keeping it. I was sort of alluding earlier, like, will ApeCoin holders who have say in this ApeCoin DAO, will that also give them say in the IP purchases that Yuga Labs makes, or the sales Yuga Labs maybe makes? You're shaking your head. That's sort of where I'm landing to. Is they're not going to do that. And again, you can't tie it too closely, or it becomes almost a security for Yuga Labs, the company.
Exactly. Yeah, there's no indication that this has any say or involvement other than Yuga getting their allocation of tokens. This has no indication that it has any involvement in the management of Yuga. Yuga is its own separate privately held entity. That this is purely a token, an ERC20 token that will be traded, gives you governance over the foundation in pursuing their goals, which they've stated as being building the game, building out the ecosystem, building out culture. So Yuga is still free to go and make acquisitions or sell properties if they wish, without any worry about the foundation or the coin.
Yeah. Okay, so you say you're not buying it, but you are bullish. Do you have a quick, putting you on the spot, like pro-con list, why somebody who's maybe not an ape holder, so would have to buy into ApeCoin, should buy some, and balanced with maybe why you're not, the pros, cons there, and then I can give my take on that?
Yeah, I mean, my feeling on the pro is that if you are excited by the culture and the community that's been created around the Ape project and all of its derivatives, and you want to participate in that, they're clearly going to be using this to invest in new projects and other projects, that you will now have a currency that allows you to participate in a way, even if you don't own an ape and can't afford an ape. This gives you a way, some sort of a way in to participation. So I think it's actually very opening and good in that regard. The con is just that these are all really on the gray area of securities law and how is the IRS going to look at this? How is the government going to look at this? And is it going to create more headaches than what it's worth for a lot of people? And does it just get stuck in that? And I think most people in Web3 right now are kind of risk takers and not afraid of being in that gray area. So I think it's going to be successful. And I think it should be exciting for a lot of people. It's just not where I personally want to be.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this a lot. Like, do I want to buy in, et cetera, et cetera? I think the governance piece doesn't excite me that much. I don't care about voting on these proposals or future proposals. Sorry, come at me, whoever, right? This sort of incentivization, okay, other games are going to potentially use ApeCoin. That's interesting, but that ties into, I think, my high-level thesis for this like unification of spend. I'm listing through like the 4 purposes that they list, that the company list, that Yuga listed for ApeCoin. I don't understand. Again, it's just like ecosystem building, right? And then there's this sort of access piece to their play-to-earn game, the merch, et cetera. And all of this sort of levels up to me to this question of like, what is Metaverse money going to be? And I think we're seeing so many different approaches to the metaverse. And of course, the metaverse is not one ecosystem. It's going to be all these different places. There's, this won't become a diatribe about like all the different interpretations of what the metaverse is. But you have Sandbox, Decentraland, CryptoVoxels, someplace. You have these places that are sort of making a space, like a place first bet, right? Like you come and buy land first, and then we're going to build all sorts of things on top of the land first. You then, of course, have like your Roblox places that I don't know what it would take for Roblox to become a more open ecosystem, but they already have users. They already have a game. You have Facebook already has users, already has sort of almost like a user first approach. Roblox, you could maybe argue a game first approach. And I think it's really interesting to think about the potential for like Bored Apes to just build their own metaverse. They're now building a marketplace. Like they're building out their own ecosystem. You know, Animoca Brands is a big investor in the Sandbox. I'm sure they have Sandbox activations, but like, you know, Bored Apes can kind of build out their own metaverse world. And you know, if ApeCoin becomes like a dominant coin across, you know, the Bored Ape metaverse, I think that's sort of what you're making a bet on. It's the play that I feel like Magic and the Treasure DAO ecosystem is sort of making, is like, if we can become this interconnected massive conglomerate of games that's sort of its own metaverse, and Magic is the token there, like that's a win. And I'm curious too, you know, it got me kind of going on this thing of like, can the metaverse have, unlike in the real world, right? Can we have just like 1,000 different currencies that we're sort of quickly exchanging within the Sandbox, going from ApeCoin when I'm in the Bored Ape part of the Sandbox or their own specific metaverse, over to CyberKongs where I'm now using Banana Coin, over to Cool Cats where I'm now using Milk Gold. Like what do you think about that? And like this idea of like 10 trillion currencies within a metaverse?
It's not going to work. There's going to be a couple. There won't be just one. There will be a couple that become sort of the leads. A good example, I was going to buy an NFT this morning, and then when I went to go buy it, I found that it was using the Rev token, not ETH, not REVV, which is actually another Animoca project, but no relation to the apes here. But it's a Rev token, which is used in video, online Web3 gaming for kind of car racing, motorcycle racing. I'm a fan of that kind of gaming content. And this was an NFT of a race car, but I don't have Rev token. I didn't want to go buy Rev token, so I decided not to purchase the NFTs this morning, or bid. It was an auction. So I think there will be winners. I think that apes are set up clearly to be one of the competitors in the space, just the sheer weight that they're bringing to us. But there will not be 10,000 currencies tokens that win. It's going to be 5, perhaps.
Okay, how about this? How about you're moving through the Sandbox and everything is accepted in, I guess, sand. I don't know if they accept ETH in the Sandbox, right? And then if you're in CyberKong's area and you want to participate in something that costs money, it's a discounted rate if you pay in Banana. So you ultimately have all these other different currencies that are accepted. There's still sort of one central currency, but then you can get discounted rates if you're using ApeCoin in the Ape ecosystem. It's like reward points or whatever at Marriott. You can pay in money, or if you like are a Marriott diehard, you can use your Marriott points.
It's never going to scale. It might work for the early adopters and you know, the community that we have today. But when we talk about that community of 1 billion users or 1 billion wallets on the horizon, it's never going to work. They're never going to. You know, my brother, who's I think very Web3 kind of oriented and has been investing in Bitcoin for a long time, is never going to just walk in and all of a sudden, I need to buy Rev, I need to buy Ape, I need to buy
Well,
Sol,
that's the point I'm making, though, is it's not required, right? You can use, there'll be one sort of, maybe it's ETH, whatever, there's sort of one mainstream currency, but then there are sort of these sub-ecosystems for the diehards who have ApeCoin, whatever, they can get discounted prices within that ecosystem if they're using ApeCoin to purchase it.
I'm sure it'll work for the diehards. It's not going to scale, though. It's going to be, it'll be niche.
So, and that's where I sort of landed with this, is like, I'm not buying ApeCoin out the gate because I think there's so much hype around it right now. It's going to be overpriced. I know it started at like $39 this morning and it's down to $6, which I think was really just a supply challenge, right? Like there was only so much supply, you know, the supply has gone up and so the price has gone down. It's not that the price is just, I think, crashing. But I'm going to give it a little time. And then I think I'm going to buy in just a little bit just for exposure to this, right? Like I think it's interesting to kind of be diversified in ApeCoin, in Magic, in Milk Gold, like to just sort of have a diversity of these sort of subcoins, because I think there will be some that, you know, that come to have some value in their own particular ecosystems. And I like having a little skin in the game to track that. But I agree. I don't think this becomes, like, you know, the metaverse money though I think Bored Ape would have the best shot of that of anybody. And so I think it's it's sort of limited. It's like buy in if you really love Bored Apes and you want to be able to like, buy their merch or participate in governance.
Yeah, like you said, you're not interested in participating in governance. The only reason that I would do it is that I'd actually want to participate in governance. I want to be part of the DAO and vote. And even though I'd have a small holding and probably just get overrun by the founders with their 8% holding, I'd still want to just participate and be in the discussion. And that would be exciting for me.
Cool. Well, anything else to be said here? I mean, we'll have lots to track as we move forward.
I think we move on. I think we've got...
We've got plenty of other things to cover.
Yeah, there's never a shortage of ape topics to discuss. Oh
my God, it's true. Well, we're actually moving, though, to a different set of our lovely fictional characters. Disney, of course, there's been a lot about Disney recently. I'm going to rattle off some of this. Bob Iger, former CEO of Disney, joined the Genies board. I want to get your take on that. Of course, I think after the Yuga acquiring CryptoPunks thing happened, there were all these rumors about Disney acquisitions, Disney acquiring Vivi, which I thought was interesting. And actually I was like, oh, that makes some sense. Then that seemed to die down. And then it was that Disney's buying Dapper, which has been like a big rumor that Disney's buying Dapper, also kind of interesting and could make some sense. Disney owns ESPN, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, so
Happy to talk about that in a minute. Yeah.
Cool. And then you and I actually haven't talked about, they hired Mike White to like oversee the metaverse. Disney made this kind of massive like metaverse hire, NFT hire. Maybe we talk about that. And then of course they did drop more NFTs on Vivi, Toy Story characters. They dropped their first Woody character on Vivi. So just, endless Disney news. Where do you want to start, Jon? You being former Disney.
Let's talk about Bob Iger first.
Love it.
So my take on Bob Iger joining the Genies board is that it's great news for everyone working in Web3, particularly in the NFT areas of Web3. And the reason is that he just brings just a mountain of credibility and pedigree to the space. The way I thought about this is that Bob Iger is a rising tide that lifts all boats. He just brings immediate credibility to every project in this space, that this is a place to look. If someone with his background and having any option, he has the world in front of him. He could do anything he wants, and that to choose to spend his time here is really, I think, a key milestone of we've arrived.
And just for
really
people who don't know,
me.
Genies is like an avatar fashion company. Like it's very much a metaverse company that's building out basically these custom avatars and fashion. And I think they work a lot with celebrities actually on their like, metaverse character avatar. Yeah, I like that rising tide, or, he's a tide that lifts all boats.
Exactly. The timing is a little bit awkward for the announcement because Bob Iger just did an interview with Kara Swisher on her podcast, and she asked him about Web3 or NFTs in particular, and he said he didn't know anything about them, and he didn't know what Disney was doing, but there might be some licensing happening. So it's a little awkward that just like a month later, all of a sudden he's an investor and on the board of a Web3 company. He did lean into that a little bit in his statement where he acknowledged he had a lot to learn and was excited to learn. The great thing that he'll bring for Genies is that he's going to open up a lot of doors. Now, I want to caution there real quick, and I'll get to that in point, but he'll open doors for them. He knows how to open up introductions to people in the industry, across many industries, in fact, so he can get them kind of meetings with the right people. Now, a lot of people were assuming all of a sudden that Disney's going to buy Genies, and that's not the way it works. Just because Bob Iger's involved doesn't mean that all of a sudden Disney will do a big deal with Genies or that they're going to be acquired by Disney. Any deals will have to have the merits. I saw this actually happen in real time when Michael Eisner left the company and Iger came in, and Eisner had projects that he was working on privately that would have Disney applications, and it was always, nope, the projects have to have their merits. And so Iger's very well aware that same rule will have to apply to him. But I do think he will open up doors for the Genies team, and it's good for everyone.
Yeah. Okay, Disney, speaking of Disney buying things like Genies, Disney buying Vivi, Disney buying Dapper. What's your take?
Okay. My take on Vivi is no, and for a couple of reasons. It's too early. Because Mike White just started. We'll talk about Mike in a second. And so he hasn't put together the company strategy, the go-to-market plan. It would be a really awkward time to make an acquisition in the space before Mike has really set up his team and done their work. And it's not Disney's kind of way to they don't operate to run into acquisitions. They take them in a very thoughtful, kind of long process. Now, long by Disney standards versus Web3 standards is something they're going to have to reconcile, but they don't rush into acquisitions. So I think it's too early for Vivi. And the other thing with Vivi is the value of Vivi is their partnerships with all the studios, like particularly like DC Comics. And so if Disney were to come in and buy Vivi, the first thing that will happen is DC Comics and their other kind of studio partners will pull their brands. And now you've just destroyed value in the Vivi acquisition, which leaves it to just being a tech and team acquisition. So I don't see Vivi being a buy in the near term, and I don't see it being a buy in the long term, unless Disney just wants to buy their tech or their team, and that's still too early for that. As to Dapper, I would say that it is too early for the same reasons, but I'll hesitate on that one just a little bit because this wouldn't really be a Disney acquisition as I would see it as an ESPN acquisition. And Dapper does seem like it would be a good fit for ESPN. Disney does partnerships already, or ESPN has partnerships with their leagues, the NBA, NFL, the Liga, UFC. So there's not a risk of losing the value in the marketplace by an acquisition. And with the rumors of ESPN opening up a sports book in Vegas, it feels like the way they're taking the ESPN brand, if that's true, might fit to have an NFT marketplace along with it. So I would hesitate that would actually is a deal that would make sense, but I don't see it in the short term. It just seems a bit weird to be that soon.
That's super helpful and very interesting. We talked about Mike White. You said he's just joined. It's too early for him to have really put together a strategy yet. This was something that happened probably a month ago. I don't know how long it was ago. Now it's not an immediate piece of news, but again, you and I hadn't talked about it, and it's relevant sort of throughout all of this. So they've hired Mike White. Tell us about that and give us your thoughts.
Yeah. So there's a couple of key takeaways here. So Mike White is he was an existing employee at the company. He joined a couple of years ago when Jimmy Pitaro came in. I called him as one of Jimmy's guys. So Jimmy Pitaro is now the head of ESPN. And when Jimmy joined the company to be head of Disney Interactive, all the digital businesses, he brought a bunch of his team with him from Yahoo, and Mike was one of them, I believe. So this is a couple things to take away here, though, that this was announced by Bob Chapek in an all-company memo, which is very unusual.
Chapek
the only time
CEO.
you ever get all-company Yep. The only time you ever get all company memos from the CEO are usually around earnings announcements when they have the quarterly statements, and then of course the happy holidays messages. I've never in my 10 years at Disney ever once saw an all company memo from the CEO saying we've hired a person to do this job. And the takeaway, and this was clearly intentionally done, was to communicate to every employee in the company that A, Metaverse is on the CEO agenda, B, this guy, Mike, is the person in charge. There should be no questioning who's in charge here. And C, we're expecting everyone to participate and cooperate and come on board with this initiative. So I think that's a really important thing that Bob Chapek did in making the announcement. The second thing that was important to me in this is that Mike White is coming in as an SVP level position. And I felt when I had a list of things that Disney would need to do when they made this announcement, one of them was it had to be an SVP or higher level role. And the reason for that is it needs to be someone with enough authority and seniority to command attention in meetings, to be taken seriously by all the C-level execs, all the president-level execs, to know that this is a person with seniority and is going to have a voice in the meetings. And a more junior person just couldn't carry that. The third thing that was really important to me and was something I was concerned about was, would Disney look at the metaverse from the perspective of licensing, like their deal with Vivi, which basically says, okay, we're going to let you use our characters and you give us, let's say, 10% of the revenue that comes from them? Or were they going to look at this from a perspective of storytelling and publishing? And what they've done is they've positioned this role reporting to Kareem Daniel, who's in charge of all content distribution for Disney. And so Mike is reporting directly to Kareem. And the way to what you should take away from this is that this is clearly placed as a content publishing, storytelling distribution role, and that definitely tells me that Disney will be moving into self-publishing here in the future, which I think is really the right way for them to go. My dream is that they have the Disney Magic Chain, which is the theme park on the blockchain, let's say, and this is basically what I took from this is confirming that that's the direction that they're going to go in. Now, how long will it take to get there? I don't know, but that seems to be what that they're communicating out to the company and the community. Finally, the positions in Burbank, sitting on the studio lot with all of the, the CEO, all of the C-level execs are all sitting on the studio lot at the headquarters in Burbank, and that's where this position is located. And I felt that this person had to be there just to be in the conversation, in the mix with the chairman of all the different divisions, and the top content executives are there too, like Sean Bailey, who oversees all film production, Kevin Feige, who oversees Marvel. They're all on the Disney lot. And so Mike is sitting there right with them, talking and thinking about how NFTs and the metaverse are going to play.
It's all, you and I have talked about this a little bit, and I think that you break it down so well. I'm curious what kind of ripple effects you think this will have throughout the industry. It feels like Disney was sort of the first to make a move this big. And I think you and I had spoken about, I think Universal was hiring like an intern level metaverse position, like seemingly, way behind. How does all of the moves Disney seems to be making, how does it impact the other companies in this space?
Yeah, it has a lot of impact. So back in 2005, the year Iger became CEO, I'd like to think of that as a transition point for the whole industry, where franchises became the key central point of strategy. And I think of this as being that's another transition point, a milestone where Mike White's mandate, as they put in the press release, is identical to how my franchise team was set up. Bring a go-to-market strategy, develop cross-company unified go-to-market approach, and develop the plan on behalf of the entire global Walt Disney Company. No one else has done that yet. Now, I am aware, and this is a confidential, so I can't say who it is, I am aware of one of the other big 5 studios that has an SVP level position working on Metaverse. They're just not ready to announce it yet. So there is another studio that is doing the same thing. But yeah, you look at like the job postings, and Universal was an intern in their consumer products licensing group, and which was very curious, help them develop their NFT strategy. It's like, you're doing that with the intern?
Yeah.
That should be I mean, and I'm sure there might be more senior people working on the challenge there, but it's just the way they're communicating it. They're not seeing the optics of it. Skydance, now this isn't a big studio, but Skydance just posted for an internship.
And they do like Mission Impossible, and they're doing that's Skydance. They have a bunch of those kind of franchises.
No, they're more a production company, but they are kind of becoming a little mini major studio themselves. They're setting up a consumer products team. So I think Skydance is the risk here is that you're thinking about this as licensing. And you need to think about this from publishing, content distribution. So Disney got that right. The other studios have not gotten that right and are behind. And
we have a whole episode, I think it was our mini episode, where you kind of really break down publishing versus licensing versus promotional deals and how all that plays out.
We don't need to revisit that.
We don't need to revisit that. Please don't come at us on Twitter the way you did after that episode. Lordy, lordy, lordy. Yeah. Final thoughts?
I have two last thoughts, and we can move on.
Love it.
The first takeaway is that Disney's moving into publishing, but they'll continue with licensing for the short term, let's say the next year. So you mentioned they have an existing licensing deal with Vivi. And they just announced a new Toy Story collection of NFTs as part of that licensing deal. So what that means is Disney's giving them use of their characters. They'll sell the NFTs. Disney gets a percent, let's just say 10% back as a return, traditional licensing. And I think that will continue for the next, let's say 18 months at least, until Mike White gets his project set up and moving. I have one takeaway that's disappointing from this part of the announcement is that my feeling has been that Disney's best strategy is the theme park on the blockchain. And what they announced was that this was really supporting Disney+. And Chapek has said that once before at an investor conference last year. I think that's wrong, but I also think that that's a little bit of either misdirection or just intentional trying to support the Disney Plus service with a little bit of a sexier kind of tech.
When you're talking about this, so the VV deal all along has been like a Disney Plus sort of deal in the sense that you could buy these NFTs and get a subscription to Disney Plus. That was the promotional side of the deal, right? Like it's always been, are you saying broadly speaking, he seems to be pushing this as like a Disney Plus idea, not a theme park on the metaverse? Or are you talking specifically around the interactions with VV?
It's a little bit different. So the licensing is Vivi, and they'll do more licensing. So Vivi will have more characters and properties that they'll sell, and Disney will collect the royalties. What I mean by the disappointment of Disney Plus is just that the communication in these announcements twice now has been that we see a bright future in NFTs to support Disney Plus. And it could be the promotion like we saw, the Golden Moments promotion, or it could be we prioritize the characters and worlds that we're releasing on Disney Plus. And I think they need to think broader than that. They need to think about existing franchises like Pirates of the Caribbean. They need to think about original one-of-one arts with Mickey Mouse, which have this huge tradition, by the way, of one-of-one original pieces of art, of paintings and other creations around Mickey and other characters. So I just would like to see them.
But the fact that you've got Mike White sort of sitting
on.
where he does, as broadly as he does, seems like it probably has more weight than a couple announcements saying, you know, Disney Plus is the metaverse or whatever. Is that seems to be your feeling too?
Yeah. My feeling is like they're just reinforcing Disney Plus for right now to try to pump or keep the excitement around the stock, and that Mike White will do his work, and he'll clearly see the Disney theme park on the blockchain is so blaring there with neon lights and sirens, like this is the way to go. I'm sure he'll get there.
Awesome. So the next topic I want to dive into, and I know we're running close to time here, but I think it's important that we also cover Doodles. I was actually at the South by Southwest activation for Doodles on Friday night. It was incredibly well done, and it actually made me think of Disney. Like I was there being like, this feels Disney World-ish. You were not at South by Southwest, right? Because we would have hung out if you had gone.
I was not.
Right.
It's tough. It's tough with a daughter in first grade to get out of town. Yeah,
to pack up and head to Texas. I get it. So I was there for. Folks have probably been hearing something about it. I actually still have some Doodle nail polish on. They had somebody like painting nails there. It was. I think it was really well executed. They had I had hot chocolate. They were making coffee drinks for folks where you could scan your doodle and they would put like a doodle design with like the foam and the milk on top that looked like your doodle, for example. Like details like that I thought were very well done and thought through. I don't have a doodle, so I got like just like a normal milk on top thing with my Kahlua hot chocolate, but it was delicious. And then they had this whole really like merch arm. They unrolled this like Shopify integration through these activations. They had all this special merch. They had things you could claim only if you had a doodle, where you would scan your doodle NFT and you could claim certain, I think, merch, whatever. Again, I didn't have a doodle, so I just like looked away sad. But I did get a doodle pin that for like $1, that came out of this kind of crazy looking machine. It felt like, ironically, kind of something for children. And of course, it's like a bunch of adults hanging out there, but it really made me feel like that's the direction Doodles is kind of moving in, this very like child wonder, like theme park, kind of direction. I don't know if you have thoughts on Doodles' recent pump or what you're seeing out of it.
Yeah,
but,
I have a lot to say about Doodles. I was blown away. I wish I'd gone to South by Southwest just to see the Doodles activation, because if I had known they were doing that, I would have made the trip just for that, because from the pictures I saw, the videos I saw, I'm blown away by what they did. Now, their partner in this was Vayner NFT, which at first I was wondering, like, well, who pulled this off? And I'll get to that in a second. So who pulled this off? How'd they do this? And then when I saw Vayner NFT was their partner in it, then it all kind of clicked. Okay, they had top people really helping them execute this.
I saw Avery on Friday night when I was there. Avery, president of Vayner NFT. Shout out, Avery.
And so one of the things about these brand activations, now that's how I'll term this, they're a lot harder to pull off than, say, a concert, or like when you saw what Apes did at NFT NYC last year. That's hard to pull off as well as they did, but it's a lot easier than a brand activation like this, because you have a build, you have the planning, you have to reserve space. It requires a level of thinking and forethought and planning and design that is a lot harder to do. And quite frankly, you see like Nike and Disney do that very well. That's what one of my team creations was, all the Tron, Alice in Wonderland activations at Comic-Con. And we would plan those out 9 months in advance, huge budgets. And they did it at that level. That was a Disney Nike level execution. So kudos to them for doing that. And I thought that this would be a year more before we'd see anything like that in the space. And I expect we are going to see a lot more of it. It's clearly, for bigger projects, the way to go. And now the question is, what are the events where this is going to happen? Is it going to be I've been thinking a lot about what is our event calendar as an industry. I didn't think South by Southwest was on that calendar, but now it clearly is. NFT NYC is on that calendar. Comic-Con might someday become on that calendar, but where you'll see these kinds of activations. I think what they did with Shopify was really cool. It was a great partnership. I even put a quote here, the first of its kind token-gated NFT retail drop. So you had exclusive retail opportunities if you had your token, you had your NFT. Now this was part of a promotion to introduce Shopify's new NFT retail capabilities. So it seems like a great integration that way. And so I think there's a tremendous opportunities with token-gated commerce. Think of Nike and Artifact. Like what happens when you go to a Nike store and if you show your NFT, there's a whole Artifact shop that opens up that you can then purchase an Artifact NFT. So awesome execution, awesome opportunities here. And I definitely think it's the way forward for the future.
Awesome. And Doodles, of course, the price has been pumping, but there are these derivative projects that I know folks have been talking about. Noodles, I think, is the first that the Doodles team sort of sanctioned, this Noodle derivative project. And interesting to see how all of that plays out. Just some quick hits here. Instagram, Mark Zuckerberg, also at South by Southwest, announcing that Instagram will have NFT integrations. No more details than that, to be honest. Sort of feels like, okay, because of course that was going to happen in my opinion. So, all right, it's coming. Who knows exactly what it'll look like? Kind of a no-brainer. There was also something, and I don't actually know that this is recent news, but there was recently the largest NFT-backed loan that basically somebody was able to get an $8 million loan collateralized by like 101 CryptoPunks that they held. And I saw a really interesting thread. Jeff Kaufman had a thread that I thought was interesting, just saying how this is further changing the dynamic between like CMOs and CFOs. I remember back when Visa bought a CryptoPunk. That was an aha moment for some folks. And for me, I remember people being like, wow, for the first time, like a marketing budget, because that was a marketing play by Visa to buy that CryptoPunk, was suddenly an asset as well. It wasn't just like a spend. It was something that may appreciate in value and actually be like an asset on their books, or it is quite literally an asset on their books. And this is a furthering of that, right? Now you have like CMOs who are, buying NFTs, whether it's Visa buying a CryptoPunk or whatever, as part of a marketing strategy that now not only is an asset on the book, but is arguably something the CFO can now make determinations about borrowing against and collateralizing it. And just the way that the machinations on the business side of all these different brands are going to be changed by NFTs and this technology, I think it's just fascinating to me for whatever reason. So Jeff Kaufman had a thread sort of talking about this a bit, and it really got my wheels spinning.
Yeah, I saw that thread. I thought it was a great thread. I think it makes a great point about that relationship between the CMO and CFO. Now, one thing I thought about a long time ago was, if you think of like a campaign for Star Wars, and the amount of marketing assets that are created to support that campaign that never get released, that just get put into a hard drive and stored somewhere, you'd be blown away how many assets are created and never seen, or from the production themselves. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity here is like, think about using these assets as part of a marketing campaign where you're using them as NFTs, where you can help monetize a marketing campaign. I think there's just awesome opportunities there. This might be more in the content-heavy sort of industries like entertainment, but there's definitely that conversation that needs to happen, that all of a sudden assets that may have been a cost center before can become a profit center.
Absolutely. Okay, you had a couple. I know we're basically at time here. I had one final thing that I wanted to flag, which was the sandbox has opened up certain experiences to Mac OS. I'm so excited. I'm a Mac user. I couldn't participate in any of the sandbox sort of games really properly previously. And Snoop Dogg's world just launched something. So I was actually playing around with that this morning in Snoop Dogg land. My boyfriend was sitting near me and he's like, what are you like in a sex? What are you listening to? It's like sex music. And it did kind of sound like sex music. It was, that's the score to Snoop Box's The Sandbox game. But it was fun. I didn't really get to get far along in it, but that was fun and exciting for me. That was sort of my last piece of news. You want to cover anything? The
only thing I'll point out, I know we had a list here of other things to cover, but the one thing I thought was really interesting is Hypersense Humans is an NFT project coming out of a joint team in Taiwan and Japan. And they publish what they believe, or what they're claiming, are the first interactive NFTs. So what I would say is, you can interact with them on OpenSea. So go to OpenSea, open up a Hypersense human NFT, and you can interact with it. And just
how can you, I'm trying to pull it up now, but my internet is being slow, it appears. How can I interact with it? Like if I click it, it changes colors or something?
It doesn't change colors. So essentially your character is sitting on a field, like if they're using like a star background or space background. And if you put your cursor over the background starts to move. And if you click, they have a little logo in the corner. And if you click on the logo, the character who's in a full body view will zoom into being a face view. So it's interesting. I think it's the first application of this. So what they've published are like their internal team has published their own kind of Genesis or founder NFTs, and I think they'll probably be launching the project in a month or two. It looks like, but
and it's anime. NFTs, I'm trying to share my screen right now. Oh, I think it's working now, so folks can maybe see this. I click it, it moves. So that is very interesting, and I'm trying to prove them wrong. I'm trying to be like, no, there's another one that's done this, but that's fascinating because I can't come up with another project. Do you know the team behind this? Are they talented?
I know a little bit about them. I know a little bit about them. The artist, the anime artist who is behind it is named Makai, who I believe is a very highly regarded animator in, I believe he's in Taiwan. But I do know a few of the folks behind it. And it seems interesting, the interactivity. And maybe it reminds me almost of like the old lenticular trading cards where you could have a couple of seconds of motion, like a baseball player swinging and hitting the ball with their bat. It might be some future applications for storytelling with NFTs.
Oh, absolutely. This stuff excites me in the way that Space Doodles excites me, which is that I'm like, the ability to click on a thing and have it change is not in and of itself, frankly, that interesting. Much like with Space Doodles, like, okay, now I have this like, a wrapped NFT, whatever. But it's the where I think this ends up going. And not that I have specific hypotheses, but it's that sign that there's so much more innovation yet to come, that these simple things, seemingly simple from like a user experience perspective, I think will bear fruit down the line. That'll be really, really interesting. So I really appreciate you kind of calling this out. Awesome. There's like a ton of other stuff we can talk about, but I think we are running up against time. I don't want to take up too much more of yours. I know I have some meetings to hop onto. But we will have you back, of course, at some point to give other updates next time Disney does something wild. And just in general, you're obviously a wealth of insights that I so appreciate getting on this show. So thank you, Jon.
You're welcome. Happy to come back anytime.
Hey, we hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, head over to Bankless HQ right now to develop your crypto investing skills and learn how to free yourself from banks and gain your financial independence. We recommend joining our daily newsletter, podcast, and community as a Bankless Premium subscriber to get the most out of your Bankless experience. You'll get access to our market analysis, our alpha leaks, and exclusive content, and even the Bankless token for airdrops, raffles, and unlocks. If you're interested in crypto, the Bankless community is where you want to be. Click the link in the description to become a Bankless Premium subscriber today. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for in-depth interviews with industry leaders, Ask Me Anythings, and weekly roll-ups where we summarize the week in crypto and other fantastic content. Thanks everyone for watching and being on the journey as we build out the Bankless Nation.